I will.
Yeah.
So now horseshoe comes. Go ahead, Jonathan. And you know how it is, like when we are this, no, when we are this,
Energized.
then our guests can't hear us, even though the mics are on and everything. Marco, how about now? Can you hear me?
I always can hear you. How can you not hear Jan?
No, I have this, there's this one anecdote. Let me just tell this one. So you're at the Niagara, no, let's say Victoria Falls, right? So there's a group of tourists at the Victoria Falls, and the guide is telling the tourists that you are standing in front of the magnificent Victoria Falls, the decibel of the sound of the water is whatever. As soon as the Armenian tourist delegation moves away, you will be able to hear the Victoria Falls. So here I am, the representative of that proud Armenian nation. We can definitely out-decibel the Victoria Falls and all other influenced voices of this room. So, but the point is for you to also hear others and for others to hear you. Marco, so happy you could join us even on Zoom, even for a few minutes. You mean so much to our collaboration and partnership. No, I'm not coming.
You know the Italian body language. This means cut it, get to the point.
They already know how I feel about you and our partnership because I said that on day one. But now that you're joining us on the morning of day 3, this is our final day of convening, and you're just back from Japan, where Marco is leading the organization of the Nature Positive Summit that will be in mid-July. I wanted to have just a little bit of an exchange, Marco, where you please do share with the groups or where you are and the coalition that you've been leading, the Nature Positive Coalition, and where you're headed from state of nature towards the protocol, what it all means. How do you see the work that we've been doing with your guidance and input from day 0, how it can support, and then maybe we can ask you some questions and also tell you what we've accomplished in the last 2 days, and then we wrap it. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, with Diana, you never know what question comes in, but that sounds a good question, a good way to move forward. So it's brilliant, Diana. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here, because as you say, this is it's important conversation that you're having, you have been having over the last couple of days, and I can see some familiar faces and friends which I say hi to, and others that are new faces, which I'm delighted you joined this gathering. let me just maybe say a couple of words of how I feel about where we are more generally, because we are really, at one of those moments where you feel on one hand disheartened and on the other hand super excited at the same time. That's how I feel. I feel, I wake up one day and I'm incredibly depressed, and soon after I become super excited because we're really at times of great challenges and threats and destabilization, but also times a great opportunity. And I feel that what's happening in the world today, by the way, it's not entirely new. I mean, we've been there before, but the destabilization, the polarization that we're seeing today, definitely didn't see it in during my whole life, and so it's a new dimension in terms of extreme level of polarization and uncertainty. And I guess it's because we are really reaching the point of, the apex of what I call the development paradox of today, a system in which we developed until now, which clearly, it cannot go on for much longer. And that creates a lot of instability, uncertainty, reaction from vested interest that don't want the change, and versus a society that doesn't have a clear way forward. So in this socioeconomic political context, which is truly unique, but is not all negative. In fact, I think this, in a climate of destabilization and uncertainty and confusion like this, actually there is a great opportunity to really build a clear alternative for the future. And that's exactly what I think at the end of the day, also what we've been discussing on the last 2 days is about. Is about providing the clarity, the tools to embrace a new direction, to measure progress in achieving that in moving forward towards that new direction, and that's what actually is missing. And it seems like a trivial thing in the big scheme of things, but actually I think it's super important because behavioralists are telling us that unless alternatives are felt as concrete and real, people don't embrace them. And so now going from the 10,000 meters of altitude down to earth, we are facing what I just said. I think is reflected in a number of things. From the Green Deal demolition in the European Union that has happened in the last 12 months, to the ISSB decision of yesterday that has rejected the idea of a standard on nature, to deregulation and rolling back that we're seeing everywhere. There is a common thread. There are several threads, but there is one that is relevant to what you're discussing today, which is it's too complicated. We don't understand it. The burden of moving into developing a strategy on nature, dealing with the biodiversity crisis. We have climate, which is already complicated enough. Please don't add anything. And by the way, biodiversity is so complicated that we can't deal with it. This is what I hear a lot by not by the technical people in CSO department, by the way, also some of them, but particularly from the management, from boards, from investors that don't have the understanding of the details. They want to understand clearly how to move forward for nature and how to do it in a way which is affordable and accessible and provides clear direction and clear information, decision-usual information. We haven't provided that particularly to the corporate sector. The climate community has been extremely disciplined immediately after Paris, in fact, even before, but particularly after Paris, in providing those tools and those guidelines, in focusing on something which was important enough, but at the same time, how can I say, manageable for users. And we haven't done that for nature. On the contrary, on one hand, we are all excited, me first, because I come from that nature measurement world long time, many years ago. And I'm so excited to see how many new developments on measuring biodiversity have happened over the last several decades. But, and that is great and it should continue. But what we haven't done, we have not provided the right guidance, aligned guidance to the sectors that we want to influence and to the sectors that increasingly wants to take action. I'm going to cite something that you're probably familiar. This is, I thought, a very interesting report and survey from McKinsey that was published in February that compares they look at the at the Fortune Global 500 companies, and it is looking how many companies are setting targets and how many companies are acknowledging the importance of different sustainability topics. And if you compare climate with biodiversity, for me that survey tells us exactly the picture and the issues they were facing. So climate, carbon, 80% of companies stable, almost from for the last 10 years. 80% of companies have targets on emissions, net zero targets. You could say, of course, we're late, but they have targets, and so they are accountable to those targets. When you go to biodiversity, there's been an increase over the last 3 years. This survey has been comparing 3 years, from 5, I think, if I remember correctly, to 13% today. 13% of the same group of companies. So 80% on climate at targets, 13% on nature and on biodiversity specifically. But if you look at the second category, how many companies are acknowledging the importance of climate and nature, on climate is 85%. So basically almost all the companies that acknowledge the importance of climate to their business, and I'm talking about material importance, so resilience, etc., they have set targets. 80% set targets, 85% acknowledge. On nature, that's the story that we need to really reflect on. 13% has set targets. 65% acknowledge the material importance of biodiversity. So I think, friends, this gives us a clear picture of what's missing. What's missing is guidance for those 60% of companies that recognize the importance of nature to actually be able to set targets, to measure nature, and do it confidently. And we can look at companies, and I'm sure there are companies that are using the complexity argument for not advancing on nature as an excuse. But I think increasingly, I got the feeling, and I hope I'm right. I really hope I'm right. I got the feeling that many companies actually are really willing to take a step into this new space, because biodiversity in a new space in terms of materiality has never been really a material issue until now. And so they're really genuine and they want to take steps, but they really lack the confidence and the guidance. And so what you're discussing and what we all are trying to do, and I think it is a responsibility for our sector, a responsibility for research and environmental sector to provide that guidance and alignment. And I increasingly feel this is our responsibility. So this is Vienna, my opening kind of thoughts and why it's so important that we're doing what we are doing, and you're part of that process right now. And so that's the context. Progress, yes, a lot of progress. I think particularly on the what, in terms of alignments, what meaning what to measure. As you know, I mean, TNFD has already produced through their process a couple of years ago the whole the 9 core pressure metrics. So on pressures, I think we're pretty clear what needs to be measured in broad sense. We are finalizing the collaborative initiative convened, underlined convened, because it's not the outcome of MPI, but it's convened by MPI with many of others inputs, organization inputs on the state of nature. And we are going to land, I hope, very soon on 4 metrics, in fact, 4 indicators, both for sites and landscape level, and the 5 metrics, because for one indicator there will be 2 different metrics, site and landscape. So we are trying to really make things simpler, clearer, to encourage uptake and to encourage companies to start that journey. Now, as soon as you attempt to come up with something which is more accessible, simpler to understand, simpler to use, and of course, at the same time, credible, you have to accept a compromise. And that's where the difficult thing is, because if you ask me if the four indicators and the five metrics that we came up with the MPI process are the ones I wanted to see, no, they're not perfect for me. But they are good enough to actually align. They're good enough to provide aligned guidance, and they're definitely much, much better than where we are today in terms of, if companies adopted them. And I think they're going to play the role that they're designed for, which is encourage companies to start the journey, to begin the journey of really looking into material impacts, material dependencies, and the responses that they need to provide, and using the state of nature as a way to demonstrate that what they're doing, their responses, are enough to really address those pressures, because that's what has been missing until now. A lot of companies, a lot of other players have taken action for nature, but simply was not enough, because they were not focusing on the right level and using the right metrics and the right metrics. Now, the next stage is beyond the what, the how. And that's, I guess, Jan, is what you've really been focusing on this meeting. And the how is as important as the what. Of course, it needs to follow the what, but it's as important, because unless companies are providing guidance on how credibly measure those metrics, they will continue to feel lack of confidence in moving forward. So the two things, the what and the how, super important. As you know, a group organization has announced the launch of a GSG protocol equivalent for nature, exactly focusing on the methodologies, on the house try to standardize those methodologies and complete the guidance that users need to move forward. So I think I'll stop there, because otherwise I can talk forever. But those are the kind of comments that I wanted to share, and I think it's such an exciting moment in so many ways. Because we feel the demand. Now is our job, it's our responsibility to provide and offer the at least the solution to an initial set of tools that could help mobilize at scale the users, and they're today the major source of footprint, and they could be making a big difference if they truly get serious about biodiversity.
Thank you, Marco. Thanks, really. Wow, we're a bit disappointed, I guess, on the ISSB news. But
it's so look,
disappointing.
Yeah, no, let me say this, because I think ISSB, it was expected. There is also an issue with their own structure. I mean, they developed the first standard, which is quite generic. Then they moved into developing, under pressure, the second standard specific on climate. Then they realized they didn't need a standard on climate, because the first standard was pretty omnicomprehensive, but they could have developed the guidance and for climate, but they didn't. They developed a standard, and now they're caught into this situation where they have a standard, genetic standard on sustainability, then they have one on climate, and then they haven't agreed to have one on nature. And of course, the perception is that they're deprioritizing nature or considering nature less important than climate, and that's where they're stuck. That's my reading. So it's not like they don't want to. They will move on nature, and it's our job to support that process and make it as rigorous as possible. But because they have a standard on climate, I'm afraid I think they will have to develop, and we'll continue to push for them to develop a standard on nature. Biodiversity.
Great. So even with that context, obviously our community will just be pressing on, because as you said, whenever they're ready for us, we'll be ready for them. And in fact, hopefully be part of that force that's instilling more confidence in them to actually then produce more formal kind of guidance and standardizations. we've been definitely, we have defined over the last 2 days the what for sure. We've been looking at extent, change in extent, condition assessment, and change in condition of ecosystems. And so our work has now focused on defining the how for these 3 pieces of what. Kind of looking really at the finer scales or lower levels of the get hierarchy, how to get us to that place where we can really be producing information with that specificity that the ecosystems deserve. We've been emphasizing a number of things, but probably sort of the trustworthiness, the importance of validation and evaluation of the results has been kind of emerging as an extremely important pillar, which will then kind of propagate that confidence across the use cases space. I did want to probably highlight one thing, and you just gave me with this news from ISSB. I think there's a hook to do that. Yesterday, we started to prioritize some of the use cases that would be kind of our major sort of guidance. And this is definitely not settled case. We've had a very dynamic sort of voting, very democratic process of identifying, proposing certain use cases, grouping them, and then voting on them. I think the results represent maybe a slight lopsidedness of the room where we have fewer corporates, fewer private sector representatives, but there are 2 categories we put on the wall. One is on compliance plus accountability, and the other being risk assessment. And by risk assessment, we meant sort of corporates who are really looking to assess risk in their supply chain, in their procurement processes, kind of looking to ensure resilience of all of that down the road, with compliance and accountability taking a slight lead over the risk assessment. And I personally felt like that's actually, if anything, I would have swapped them. And especially now with the standards, and as you said, even with EUDR, these things come and go. You know, the regulation is adopted and it's pulled back. And I personally feel like that is more of a shaky space rather than corporates kind of really wanting to ensure the longevity, resilience of their operations. So you mentioned sort of the sectors that are ready. I wanted to see if you have any suggestion, kind of input to our thinking on that side. And also, Marco, you just came back from Japan and you also interact a lot with companies in Asia. What is it? I mean, we definitely have more of the Europe, America kind of representation here. And when we think about companies too, but what does this look like in Japan, for example, in China? Like, have they actually taken off? Are they doing the thing? Are they actually already doing nature positive? If you could just offer a little bit of reflection on that, and then please, everyone else, whatever questions you have. But I just have this really healthy curiosity. What does it look like in Japan and in China and vis-a-vis sort of the Western Hemisphere corporate landscape?
No, thank you, Yana. So, quite a lot in there, but 2 things perhaps, yeah, then I come to Asia. On the use cases, I think that's exactly the right approach, because it's time that we stop talking in abstract, but we need to really focus on whatever we produce and deliver is used for. That's exactly the approach we took also for the state of nature metrics process. We didn't start talking about metrics until we actually agreed on the use cases, on the priority use cases. Now, you're right in categorizing the 2 big groups of use cases. One is the compliance related, and the other one is more the value case, the business case, whatever you want to call it, related to materiality, to resilience, risk management, and opportunities. I think we're not highlighting enough the opportunities dimension, and we should always connect challenges and risk with opportunities, because that actually is what really resonates strongly also as well as risk with the private sector. I don't think it's either or, obviously. I mean, this is not going to, it's not an exciting answer to your question, but it's not an either or. The point is, however, that compliance, the history tells us that compliance is the most powerful. I mean, if you look at the 70s when the first regulation on pollution, for example, came up, particularly water, it was obvious that, you know, that was a response to citizens' pressure, society pressure, because society was at the receiving end of polluted water, polluted rivers, and all the rest. And that was fundamental for really changing radically the situation of water pollution in the countries that adopted that regulation. So regulation is no doubt is ultimately the most powerful tool. But as you say, today regulation, it's under attack. That attack won't last for much longer, I have to say, because we will get to the point of the pollution 70s situation, where situation was so bad that they had to regulate, and society demanded regulation. Also for other things like biodiversity loss. But we don't. But on the other hand, the great opportunity today is that many companies are beginning to understand something that, of course, for pollution wasn't the case. Understand the double materiality of nature loss, the fact that they are also paying the price for it. And companies, and it's not just about risks, because we talk about risk as like something that will happen, you know, in the future. These are actually costs already. Risk are already translating into costs for many companies, particularly companies that are on the front line of dependency on biodiversity. I was talking to Nestle recently. I mean, the impact on cocoa and coffee supply chain, the shocks over the last few years, climate change related, but also all connected, because deforestation, it's been massive. You know, we are talking about billions of losses, not of risks. So I would say the more we can now play on that, I would prioritize, if I had to choose between the two to what gives more emphasis, I would say the materiality and the risk stroke opportunity dimension for companies. When it comes to, because companies are increasing number of companies are ready to then understand that, and are ready to and are demanding for tools, and we can provide those tools. When it comes to Asia, I mean, Japan and China are completely two different universes, so it's difficult to talk about Asia. But I know China well, because I've been serving on the China Council to the Ministry of Environment for 12 years now. China is what's happening in China is extraordinary, I have to say. And I can't believe, you know, if you ask me 15 years ago, if I would ever say this, I would have thought you were mad. China is true. You know, you have followed probably just a month ago. They approved. It was called the Environmental Code. The Environmental Code is the second unified piece of legislation that China has ever agreed. The first one is about the Civil Code that puts together all the criminal legislation on criminal charges and everything, the penals part of the legislation of the country. I mean, they've done the second one on the environment. The second one, the ever comprehensive piece of legislation, it's on the environment. That tells you how much they're prioritizing the environment, and not because of great, empathetic consideration or philosophical. It's because they've been feeling the pinch of climate and environment degradation at the level of individual well-being, at the level of economy, and the whole energy revolution, you know, the renewable revolution at the early 2000s was not about climate change. It was actually about pollution, because people felt really the direct effect. So China is ahead like no one else in the world right now, in the way they think, in the long term, in the way they approach the long term. And of course, they can afford it because of the political system that they have. I mean, you know, let's face it, they make decisions that are 10 years, 15 years ahead. Japan is a different story. Japan, I think the companies are not, I don't think, don't quote me, swear, cross your fingers, swear. Yeah, I don't think they're ahead of the West the great adoption of TNFD, the great response to the Ninja Positive Summit, we're going to have 2,000 people in the conference, is not about that. Is more about the fact that they're approaching these issues, and not just in this case biodiversity and nature, in a much more cohesive way as a society, and that's why it's much less leopard spot. Like in the West, they move as a cohort, because yeah, there is a cultural dimension. By the way, my wife is Japanese, so I understand the culture quite well. So it's very different. But yeah, I wouldn't say Japan is necessarily much ahead of the West in that sense. But they're definitely there. And the good thing about Japan is that once they move, they will move in mass. So they will move. They will move in a much greater cohesion.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Marco. Folks.
Sorry, one thing, Anna, one thing
Yes.
I wanted to just say. I hope you guys, during the last 2 days, and I see Emma in the room, and I bet you raised it. No, because we receive feedback on the State of Nature Met consultation, which, interestingly enough, was on the metrics, so on the what a little bit, but majority of it was really on the how. And part of the how questions was something that is not to do with methodologies per se, but it's very important from a methodological perspective, which is definitions. And one of the definitions that was felt was missing was the definition which is, I think, critical in the ecosystem condition space, which is the condition classes. So how to define condition, the improvement of condition in discrete classes that help companies understand more clearly where they stand in that journey of ecosystem condition improvement. And I don't know whether you discussed that, but this is one of the little things that perhaps are underestimated. But those are the things that, once agreed, will generate so much more understanding of what we mean by condition and how companies can embark on that journey.
All right. Thanks, Marco. Did we cover, maybe not in that exact term, but I feel like.
Yeah.
To the user-facing side, simplifying it into categories. The scientists want to keep it out of categories as long as possible, which is good. But when you're communicating this, it's going to help to be very clear on the category. Right, man? Yeah.
But first of all, people agree what the threshold for green category are.
Yeah, there'll be some fighting about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah. What is
Okay, so let's remember we're speaking with Marco. So
No. It's great to
Did you
hear that.
Andrew? Did you hear Andrew's response? So yes,
Yes.
basically, we have begun to talk about it. It was recognized, the importance. And by the way, I do want to recognize for you a few people, because Andrew was right there, told you guys last met, I think, in Bellagio. Up until like a week ago, was with Sambi, and I told you in secret that he was joining the Atlas team. So he's the Atlas program lead as of June 1st. Today,
This is
no longer a
Yana.
secret.
Yana. This is a clear signal that this space is gaining momentum. Now organizations are poaching stuff from each other like companies used to do. So it's beginning to be really an exciting space where talent is yeah. So that's good.
And then, of course, I don't know if you see Zoe, so thank you very much for making the connection. But Zoe I also revealed the secret yesterday, will be taking this work forward following this first workshop. So she's joined the team, I don't know, whenever we sign the contract as the project design lead. So this work lives on and will continue. Any questions for Marco? Yes, Drew, and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Marco. This is Drew Purvis, Nature Lead at Google DeepMind. So one of actually several people here representing the world of big tech, including my colleague Valeria from Google and Ted from AI and so on. And my question is about, at least from that helicopter view, there have been some modeling-based products released into the world that seem to provide very simple indices. I'm thinking things like EII, which is from the National History Museum Predicts project, EII from IVAP and so on. So I just wondered what your view was of those metrics, because I understand, some companies are looking at them, they are being shared with the world, but.
And we have none of them represented here, so you feel free to say exactly what you feel.
It's not on IVAP, it's not on IVAP.
Oh, no.
Carefully, Marco.
Oh, they should also.
We do have Neil Burgess here, just so you know.
I spotted Neil straight away, so that's why I carefully worded my intervention. Now, look, if I understand correctly, because you're a bit far away, but the role of technology and all the rest, and what I think about this latest, the whole AI related modeling stuff. I mean,
No, Marco, hang on. On indices, Drew was asking, I think this is where this is going.
So
Was asking
my specific question was about what you thought of these existing simple indices like BII, EII, which is coming out of IVAT, and the star metric and things like these.
oh gosh, all right.
Gosh.
I mean,
He said, gosh.
we need a workshop on that.
Yeah.
It's just it's not an answer. Well, but my general answer, because it's difficult for me to comment on specific, even if the owners of those methodologies are not in the room. We took a very we need to be extremely open in this conversation and be careful not to, I think, take side too early, too quick, too early on whatever methodology or metric, because things will move on so fast and there will be so many developments happening every day. And even some of the methodologies or metrics, depending how you look at them, available today will evolve very dramatically, very quickly. And by the way, AI is going to have a massive influence on all that. I just came out from an interesting meeting with the Unilever yesterday in London, where they're now using AI into their sustainability strategy in a way which is super innovative. So what I'm saying is that I think it's important that we try to create a system of guidance and tools that, on one hand, part of it is stable to guarantee continuity. And for me, that part is the what to measure, is the really high level kind of indicators and metrics. That needs to really be agreed and stay for a reasonable amount of time. My view is at least a decade to match the the CBD process, at least, because the continuity is fundamental for comparability, for the journey that we mentioned earlier, and all the rest. Then there is, and that particularly applies to the how part, that's where actually I think we need to be extremely flexible and accepting that anything that comes in, anything that could improve the way to measure more rigorously, more credibly, the what, the metrics, should be embraced and should be welcome. At the end of the day, my personal perspective is that if we know what to measure, how you measure it, as far as it's within the recognized group of methodologies that are considered credible and robust enough, doesn't really matter that much. As far as the outcome, the metrics are still the one that we have focused on. So that would be my broad answer to your question. That is not as specific as you wanted, perhaps, but yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
So one more question, and then we're gonna have to.
Sophie and
Hello, Marco. Thank you for your introduction. Sophie from the Lambertini Group. I work there as a product manager. Quick question for you. Is there a specific industry you think is giving the cost and biodiversity loss more than others? Is there like a priority order you're seeing based on your consultations?
So, if I understand correctly, ask me what kind of sectors, what kind of industries are more engaged or more advanced, and yeah. So, look, I think that the two categories comes to mind quite clearly, which are very different. One is the one that really work on the ground and they have an impact on the ground. So mining companies, forestry companies, agriculture companies, although there is a cultural dimension which is more complex, but let's say forestry companies, mining companies, in our experience, have been the ones much more engaged. They understand much better. They have a much simpler value chain, and so they really connect more clearly and understand and feel the direct materiality of biodiversity loss in their own operations, not necessarily the value chain, which is a more complex exercise. And second category, which is completely different, and is the insurance sector. The insurance sector is so interested into this stuff, and particularly the connection between nature and climate, because of course they're taking a long-term perspective. They are feeling the pinch of climate change, and they know that nature exacerbates climate change. So that's the angle they come in, and water stress and all the rest. And so it's been fascinating to see so many insurance companies and the depth of understanding. Talking to Japan, in Japan, the leading companies in this conversation on the Nature Summit are really insurance companies. And then there is the third category, which are the big companies with complex value chains, traders and others, that understand and feel particularly their dependency on climate and nature for a value chain, supply chain perspective. But they are at a loss in terms of identifying, the locations of those stresses because of the system that is in place, where sourcing moves every year depending where it's cheaper, instead of investing in resilient supply chains, which I hope will be the outcome of all this mess that is happening also geopolitically. By investing in the resilient supply chain, you actually secure your dependency much more than and save money much more than moving opportunistically, from one place to another, simply driven by market prices. So those are the three categories, but the first two, I think, are the ones that really I feel that Emma has been dealing with a lot of those pilots, so she will have a deeper insight as well.
Thanks, Marco. One more question from.
Hi, Marco. Ben Cresswell here from James Cook University. I was really struck by something you said about the sort of hindcasting to lessons learned from the past, when you talked about interventions on pollution, where really what was unlocked was public outcry. And I feel that these tools and the concepts that we're working on now really need to be able to be communicated and understood by society at large in order to translate pressure to business and government. And I just wondered if you had any insights as to lessons learned from those experiences about that we could implement in what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, great question. Look, so unfortunately, so this is the paradox, another paradox. We're living in thousands of paradoxes. This is another paradox. If you ask a person on the street, do you like nature? Do you like animals? Let's put it super simple. Everybody would say yes. Do you enjoy seeing a forest on fire? Everybody will say no. And yet we are the direct drivers of all that, right? Of all that loss. So one paradox is that we are still struggling to connect, and actually modern society is separating even further from before, the causality of our actions with nature loss. First big problem, because we are not recognizing the pressures. We're pointing the finger of hypothetical bad people or companies, not recognizing that we are part of the system firsthand, as individuals. First big problem, referring to society mobilization. Second problem is that in reality, climate change, you feel it. It's hotter, it's drier, it's wetter, you've got floods in your place. Biodiversity is so much more subtle. I used to go with my mother every morning before school to the fish market because I loved it. At the time when I was young, 90%, probably 95%, some cases 100% of the fish on the market on my hometown was local. I go back now, 80% is imported from somewhere else, far away from the Mediterranean. But the fish is still there. You don't feel the difference because the fish, and they look very much similar fish, is still there. And so that's the problem with biodiversity loss. You have to make a intellectual effort, a cognitive effort to understand, first of all, the causality, second, what's happening. And with climate is the opposite. With climate, it's pretty clear that if you emit, you contribute directly. And by the way, I feel the consequences because my crop has gone dry and dead, and my house has been flooded. So that's the challenge with diversity, and I think that's why the world I've been part of for almost all my life, and conservation NGOs, have not used so much the issue of materiality, but more the emotional message, because that works with everybody, because everybody loves nature, everybody understands nature is important. But actually, we got to make a bigger effort in explaining the consequences of nature loss to us and make it personal. That's fundamental. That's failure of our 50 years of NGO movement on conservation. We haven't made it personal. We talk about tigers, to Europeans. We talk about elephants, instead of talking about the biodiversity that is close to us and as a direct personal impact if you lose it. Anyway, it's a big question. It's a partial answer, but I hope at least provoke some thoughts.
Thank you so much, Marco. It's never enough time with you.
Yeah.
But whatever you think, I think it's never enough time with you.
No, thank you.
And here my word stands. So thanks so much for your morning with us.
Thank you. And by the way, because I go to Villars quite often, if there are any birder in the room, there is a couple of golden eagles down the valley, towards the valley, and this time they should courting in the sky. So I don't want to disrupt the workshop, Jana, but keep an eye on your right. I think it's the right side in your side. So because they're beautiful.
Super. Thanks, Marco. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye.